I'm Jim Check. You're watching Kelowna Now. In our ongoing BC election coverage, we have candidate from Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream, Kevin Kraft, independent.
You bet.
Independent candidate. Again, all that turmoil, like a missed opportunity, do you think? Or
Very much so. Yeah, I mean, you and I have chatted before, and we're both sports people, and I think it was a fumble on the 1 yard line, and it's under the pile right now, and it's concerning. You know?
Yeah, because they basically handed the ball at the 1 yard line, and then hopefully, I guess for the Conservative Party, not the moment they look back on and say that was a missed opportunity.
Yeah, there's no doubt we need a change in government, and I think the opportunity there was to put together a dream team, so to speak, where people trust in their local individuals, people are feeling like they're being listened to locally, and that just didn't come to fruition.
So there's been some pressure out there to get, I think mostly from the Conservatives, to get the independents to drop out. And then I think there's been some encouragement by the NDP for the independents to run, because I think they see it as an opportunity for them to win, I guess, right? And then how do you see that?
Well, my intent and purpose is to run as an independent. Like, I'm proud to be the only candidate in the central Okanagan who's not attached to the BC United fallout. I'm running purely to represent the communities that I grew up in and love, and represent families and people who are working hard. And we have a lot of local issues. We have 6 distinct communities in Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream, and arguably, Coldstream's a perfect example of a community feeling lost and frustrated with regards to having their voices heard, being looped into this new riding. And it feels like both parties at this point have not done a good enough job listening to the locals, and the candidates put in place by all parties, Green included, were put there without a due public process and a nomination race.
You're not inexperienced. You come with some experience. You've been sitting in government. Maybe tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I mean, when I moved back to the Okanagan with my young family, my wife and I immediately got involved in our local societies, local groups, local schools, the PAC, things like that. And we were just connected to the community because that's how we were raised. And it's so much value there. And in doing so, I had the privilege of being on the Ellison Fire Hall for 8 years, engaging in that community, intimately. And then, I got to be president of my local strata, president of the Ellison Parks and Recreation Board, and kind of immersed in the community. And so the existing director at the time asked me to be the alternate. And in doing so, I had to relinquish my role at the fire hall and kind of make that pivot. He announced that he wasn't running again in the next election, and that was my kind of punchline into local politics. And it's been something that I take seriously and something that I'm very passionate about. And I believe being locally rooted and having knowledge of the vast amount of issues from one end to the other that are in the regional district and at the provincial levels is extremely valuable.
What are the issues that face, like, it's a big riding, Kelowna, Lake Country and Coldstream? What are the big issues there?
Well, I mean, you look at like an area like Joe Rich, for example. You're on a major highway. You have a fire service that's servicing a major highway all season and all year long, both in tourism season as well as big white season. I would love to see more funding and a funding model from ICBC or MODI supporting those rural fire halls that are on major highway corridors. We got highway projects going on out there. And if we're going to stick on road projects, the Conservatives announced that they'd like to see a second crossing in 8 years. And arguably we have, Highway 97 on the way to Penticton that is in interesting times. We have West Side Road, for example. That's a challenge. We have the bottleneck at Beaver Lake Road into Lake Country, which is extremely troubling during tourist season and over the summer. And we have, Highway 33 issues and access issues that are all roadway related. And I can go on all day about the issues because, again, there are 6 distinct communities in the riding, and it's vast because we're talking about water systems. We're talking about 2 post-secondary institutions that are having to pivot to more local offerings. We have an airport that's expanding and putting pressure on the Eastlands, which is bordering up against the community of Ellison. We have all of these issues. And I mean, as an educator and a teacher, I also value schooling and schooling infrastructure and support for teachers in educational spaces. And the metrics around the growth in the Okanagan have been no secret for the better part of 20 years. And I feel like the province and our school districts have done a poor job in preparing us to accommodate those needs.
BC United and the Conservative Party had similar platforms, and they're kind of like, you could say there was more common with them than there was different. But it's odd that the BC NDP now are kind of like pivoting to kind of like support some of the things that were being said by both the Conservative and the United parties, like, axing the carbon tax, or what do they say, replacing the carbon tax if Pierre Poilievre wins the federal government, and then even, like involuntary care. And they seem to be backpedaling on quite a few things as they near an election, where they definitely were not willing to listen prior to that.
Well, another thing that's frustrating is we have these proposed solutions to our healthcare and a few other issues. And it's like, well, if these are proposed solutions, arguably they should have been implemented years ago to try and accommodate the issues and the pressures that our system has. And it's frustrating to hear that these are solutions, and it is an election year. And it's like, oh, well, that's convenient that you're coming up with these solutions, or perhaps backpedaling on your stance prior. And it gives the public a little bit of an uneasy feeling. Like, it's weird right now that both parties, left and right, are kind of doing a dance in their placement of the political spectrum. Yeah,
so we bring about healthcare. Take, for example, the Oliver Emergency Room. Over 30 closures to date this year, right? From January to now, over 30 closures. And then we've seen some in the northern parts of the province where, they're I think the extreme case was that, they were told to drive 400 kilometers for emergency care. And, I think, in province of Canada or British Columbia, that would be like just a basic need that should always be fulfilled.
Yeah. What's troubling, and to extend on that a little more, is healthcare or multiple issues. There's this interesting situation that's not being talked about enough. It's more the rural and small town versus heavy municipal and larger municipal centers. As a rural rep, like, I can say it's troubling to see from a provincial level where the funding's going, where people's dollars are kind of being ported to, and it's an inequitable representation. And what it does is this creates challenges for families, like you said, in the medical system that are desperately needing more support, and they have to travel, and sometimes distance and time is not in people's favor.
The mayor of Merritt was very vocal. He lost 2 doctors due to the vaccine mandate, and he's been very vocal. And he's called for different things. I think even Surrey doctors have called for a leadership change in the health minister. Does it seem like that they've been deaf to rural BC or outside the Lower Mainland to you?
Yes. I mean, like I said, rural and smaller communities, and it's been devastating because we feel like we're not being heard, and the issues that are presenting themselves in this provincial election and have been over the last years has just been slightly more felt in rural communities because it's time, it's effort, it's money, it's focus, and it feels like there is none.
Do you think, though, that it's like, because a lot of people say that you win the Lower Mainland, you basically win the election, that they just focus on that? They just, the rest of the province can,
Yeah, I mean, if we could look at some form of political voter reform and how that looks like, I don't know, because arguably when you're talking about the resource sector, for example, like you have northern and interior BC, which are chock full of resources. There's so much opportunity, but we only have 6% of British Columbia's population out in northern communities. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting to watch how the dynamics of the conversations around resources and how they're applied basically are dictated through heavy municipal centers and the way government thinks that they'd like to see it work.
Forestry, big problem in British Columbia, according to John Rustad, Kevin Falcon, and many others. Even like
everyone.
David Eby admits that there needs to be more work, and it also relates to climate change and relates to wildfires. And it's just, and the forestry companies are saying they're not even being invited to the table to have discussions, because if they could cut more, if they could get access to more firewood, we'd have younger forests and less wildfires.
Yeah, as a firefighter with some experience in that realm, and I attended COFI this year, Conference of Forestry Industry, there's a massive pivot that is affecting this forestry industry with little to no support or guidance from a provincial government. And so everyone can say that it's important and that we need to address it and we need to bring it up. But there are so many synergies between watershed protection and freshwater management, wildfire protection and prevention, as well as preparedness, especially around interface zones and municipal areas, much like Kelowna and the Okanagan. And again, we have to protect those resources and assets because it has a trickle-down effect through agriculture, tourism, and economics. So, anytime I see a fire burning, and though the fire service might say, hey, that's not a priority fire, I see dollars burning, I see opportunity burning, I see assets burning, regardless of the situation. And so I would love to see more effort and more focus on the fire services because, again, if we're taking things like climate change seriously and British Columbia's fire season is a massive part of that, we should be doubling down on our efforts to ensure that our focus on the forestry industry and BC wildfire is taken seriously and putting those fires out.
We've seen that wildfires are such a a detrimental thing to tourism and in the area, and obviously loss of homes and all that, and it just seems to be so much money is being put into fight fires and so little being put in to mitigate. The Conservatives said they're going to kind of flip that and do more into mitigation and prevention as opposed to just fighting fires. And where would you stand on that?
Well, we absolutely need a shift in focus and how that's prioritized. And I do hope that the Conservatives follow through on that. And this is where the independents get to shine because we get to have the opportunity to hold either side accountable and really push those efforts. As an independent, I would be in there and pushing for those changes. And, I'm wearing my Explore BC tourism pin. And, the tourism industry, the winery industry, and just the economic, especially in the Okanagan area, is felt so significantly. And I've had international students in my home for a couple of years now, and I got a message back and saying, hey, I have a TikToker that's creating content about how the experience in the Okanagan was miserable and it was terrifying and there was fear involved and, his trip was ruined and all of these things. Like, it's an international impact that is impacting that tourism. And when you come to the Okanagan, it's the best place on earth. You're going to come back. And what's happening right now is we had the best grow season, arguably, other than our stone fruits and cherries because of the winter snap. But we had the best grow season. We had the clearest skies for the better part of the last 15 years. It was a beautiful summer. And we were so impacted by the tourism industry and our offerings. It was really sad to see.
Yeah, so the Airbnb policy, according to Renee Merrifield's hurt really bad. Even NDP candidate Loyal Wooldridge said that the Airbnb policy, that the one-size-fits-all hammer, has hurt the industry. What would you do differently and is to kind of like support tourism?
Yeah, there's a couple things that we could look at and do. I am also of the mindset that taking away Airbnbs and taking away short-term rental opportunities has been devastating to the tourism industry. And me, with a young family, 3 kids, going to a hotel and those costs and kind of the logistics around a hotel stay is very unmotivating, not enjoyable at times. It's tough. Maybe you have to get 2 hotel rooms, etc. Like it's added cost. And if you can go into a home and create that opportunity to have a very peaceful space, you can cook your own meals, you can engage in the community, you can go to the farms and buy products and bring them home and create that. It's a more immersive and connecting experience in that travel that I think is more valuable. And when we're talking about agriculture, for example, and looking at supporting local, I think there's so much opportunity there where we can open up value-added products and open up different opportunities for farmers to have mini co-ops or markets or things like that, where more communities are supportive. Because when you're connected to food and connected to that opportunity and more year-round, source of income, there's more value to community, there's more value to connection, and there's more value to all of that. But it impacts tourism and it impacts the economy.
One of the things that British Columbia has is a huge resource base. That's forestry, which is in shambles, the job losses. And I interviewed the head of COFI as well. But also, mining and all that stuff. And federally, Kevin O'Leary has said that we have one of the worst asset managers ever running the country. And then even, like there's talk about in British Columbia that we also have a government that does not allow British Columbians to reap the rewards of our rich resource base.
There's no doubt that we have massive opportunity with regards to our resource sector. It's no secret that we need to modernize, adapt, and implement different technologies to ensure that our practices are, in fact, the best practices that we can apply. But working with our Indigenous partners and Indigenous communities across the province, like there is interest there to create prosperous conditions for people across the province. And it's really frustrating to see support for one thing and not for the other, or pushing one way with no kind of prosperous opportunity to make those changes. We've kind of created these conditions where we're forced to change, or we're maybe unable to change, and then we're kind of treated like public enemy number one.
RJ, you're watching our time for us, and you'll let us know where we're at. But I did an interview with Mario Canseco-Polster on Friday. Basically, the NDP and the Conservatives are polling neck and neck, with the Premier having a little more popularity than John Rustad. Obviously, his name is more well known. If you're successful in your riding, do you have a preference of which government you're kind of like you form government with?
I think it's no secret that most of the independents running also want to see a change in government. Whether they're slightly right of center or even center left. I think there's an effort and a idea that we do need changes in where we put priorities on things. And I believe that there is encouragement of the independents to kind of form a group that will potentially support those changes in government that a lot of people and many of us are hopeful to see. The opportunity around like the situation where it is so close neck and neck, that actually presents itself a prime opportunity for people to do their research and look at their candidates that are selected and choose someone who truly represents the values and the importance of their local issues to Victoria. And that's the job as an MLA, is to be relatable, reliable, and representative of those communities. So I really think if there's independents that are successful, and there's a group of them that are successful that can hold the balance of power, not only do we get to hold either side accountable, but we have very few limitations when it comes to opportunities as an MLA from an independent perspective or a party perspective. We have every right and almost every power that any party MLA would have. And in fact, if we have an independent group, we would potentially hold more power because we would hold that balance of power between two neck and neck, left and right opportunities.
Similar to the Andrew Weaver situation back, a previous election.
Yeah.
Lots of, I guess, strong candidates in the independent in the Okanagan area too. Like we experienced Stephen Johnson, Ashley Ramsey, yourself, that are well known and already sitting in government as well.
Yeah, I mean,
other than Ashley's not sitting in government, but yeah.
Well, I was going to say, and Kevin Acton and up in
Right.
Vernon Lumby, right? Like we're all sitting elected officials that are passionate about our communities and our areas that we represent. And so the frustration is that, sometimes independents get viewed as far left or far right people with singular issues that they're trying to drive forward. There are really people in this election that are in it for the right reasons and looking to provide that opportunity for the residents of their communities to really be heard at a provincial level, which is something that hasn't really existed. And the opportunity that presents itself is a historic moment in the BC legislature.
What are you hearing at the door? You're out there door knocking, obviously. What are you hearing at the door, the concerns of British Columbians, and how are you meeting those needs for them when they're talking to you?
Well, it's an interesting shift. There's been obviously a concern of like where the province is going, and all of these issues: healthcare, housing, cost of living, everything else. Like those are prime issues. What's interesting is the shift and the dissatisfaction or the disenfranchised voters who are saying, "I really don't want to set up my tent in either political camp, and I'm somewhat politically homeless in the sense that I want to be represented, but I have my concerns on either side." And there is a narrative that is happening there organically that is very interesting. And for me as an independent candidate, My top 5 priorities are freshwater management, food security and agriculture, BC wildfire and wildfire management, forestry industry, and making sure that we get a head start on those. But for me personally, I'm a hunter, fisher, outdoorsman, recreationist. We've been asking for changes at the provincial level for so long, and it's fallen on deaf ears. And all we've had is changes to our hunting regulations and things like that. We are asking for funding model changes. We're asking for direct source funding from the licenses and the fees we pay to make sure that that money is going directly to the cause that's supporting conservation efforts by all kinds of different societies, as well as conservation officers and protecting our backcountry. No one's said anything about that. And that's a huge passion of mine. It's a huge community and a huge group, and it's part of our provincial heritage.
A lot of that's related to wildfires too, because obviously a lot of damage is caused through wildfires. And that's one that's kind of always surprises me. Like, it seems like sometimes the current government, maybe even the bureaucrats, don't want to listen. We have a Coulson Aviation, the largest wildfire company in the world, based in Port Alberni, that has 0 contracts with British Columbia.
There's a few businesses and opportunity with regards to infrastructure, apparatus, but also technology. Huge opportunities when we're talking about AI, and I'll plug you here too. You know, there's AI opportunities. The GIS systems are somewhat out of date with how they're existing in the provincial level. There are companies out there that are doing fantastic work identifying apparatus, equipment, fire movements, all real time, weather patterns, and can put together that data that give operators on the ground and team leads on the ground real data to implement best practices.
And
like
obviously fighting
astounding.
fire, it's the first few hours that matter, right?
Absolutely.
Because once it goes past a certain thing, it's about putting brakes in and hoping for the best.
The first few hours and the first night.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, there's lots of technology coming. We just put out that AI summit. Lots of technology coming, including drones that fly by themselves and fly 24/7. All kinds of good stuff coming, but we have to have a government that listens for sure.
Well, and we need prosperous conditions to invest and provide and plan and protect, and that goes for all levels.
So we're at that point where there's 5 minutes left. And 10 minutes left. So we still got 5 minutes. There you go.
Perfect. What else do we got?
There's been talk out there that David Eby's NDPs are running a fairly negative campaign. I talked to Mario Canseco about the pollster, and he says that's an old game doesn't have the same, like pulling old tweets, stuff like that's an old game that doesn't have the effect it used to have, and that it's getting tired. And a lot of young people look at that and say, yeah. You know what I mean? Like instead of where this cancel culture has kind of run its course. If you look in on the national stage or international stage, they tried it with Joe Rogan, actually just made him more popular.
Well, you said the young piece. So my goal, as probably one of the more younger candidates in this province, is to motivate that younger demographic to actually speak up and be heard. Because there is frustration with the old, I got this in my pocket and I'm going to play this card because you said this, X amount of years ago or whatever. I'm over that. And even running as an independent, I'm not in it to slam the other candidates or the parties. What I find the conditions are frustrating, but here's my ideas and here's what I want to promote moving forward. And if the parties actually were to focus on how they're going to implement strategies, how they're going to improve on the budgets, how they're going to actually impact communities without taxing us more and kind of affecting the bottom line, that's what people want to hear. Yeah. There's desperate appetite to hear action and traction moving forward.
There seems to be a kind of a flip there, because in the polls, it shows that the older demographic more supports the NDP and the younger people are moving more onto the right side or center left, kind of supporting Conservative or United candidates.
At the federal and provincial level. It's really interesting. I think we're just in unprecedented times and unprecedented conditions in North America. But if we're to boil it down to local issues and really focusing on local efforts, which is ultimately the job as an MLA, there's so much common ground between parties that it's really frustrating to see what's happening, in the back and forth and left and right positions, where it's we have some common ground here. We actually need to take the steps forward to reach those goals. And that's going to take collaboration and working together, because we have to agree on how we're going to approach things. And that's the work that right now is kind of going missed.
Yeah, it's kind of like a distraction to the real issues, right? When we start talking about a tweet that was done, whatever, a long time ago and stuff like that. And instead of like, say, here are the issues, like the NDP has had the privilege of running the province for 7 years. I would think they should be saying, hey, this is what we got done and this is what we're going to get done. Yeah. Instead, we're seeing like John Rustad's going to take this away, take this away, take this away, take this away.
Yeah, and there's some fatigue around the 4-year at a time approach. And what we need to do is look at our longer term planning, our longer term, initiatives and goals, and really put the framework to kind of attain those goals. Slamming some idea that, we're going to build a bridge in 8 years or put something out there that's going to impact us in 4 years. Like, that's really just playing with numbers and voters. And it's the political game that I think many people are tired of.
Yeah. I guess on the other side of it, the Conservatives are a very new party. And, like a lot of people would say they don't have the experience to form government. But I guess the one way to do it is to, put yourself in the fire. I mean, there's a lot of people like yourself that have, experience in government as well, too.
Yeah. I mean, you can't go from a party of a 5% rating at the start. And now with everything that's happened and BC United Fallout and all of the stuff that's happened, like now you're polling at a 44 or whichever percent rating. Like the growing pains of that within a 3-month period is insane. There's potential MLAs or candidates that are in place that were thinking that they were going to gain some experience and gain some candidate experience and really work on where they're going. And now they might actually have to be an MLA. And that, is worrisome to some people out there in different ridings.
Right. So this is your time now. Go ahead and speak to the voters. And
yeah, okay, well, if you're interested truly in having local representation, I truly encourage you to research your candidates. Go to the party websites, look at their platforms. You can go to kevinkraft.ca. All of my interests, my priorities, interviews, and where I stand are there. I'm not afraid to participate in public forums and public venues and debates and drawing my line in the sand on where I stand on the issues. I'm confident in my experience. I'm also excited that I'm part of the younger demographic that's really trying to make change that represents the future leaders of this province. And I hope that I do my best to motivate others to get involved. And if you're truly interested in everything that's going on and what I have to say, please reach out. Please talk to me. And like I said, we have 6 distinct communities in Kelowna-Lake Country-Coldstream. And if you are not aware of the local issues and the different needs of the local communities, then you have no business being a representative MLA for the long term.
One of the things I want to leave people with for sure is to get out and vote. And advanced voting is already there. So if you want to get out there and do it right away. Yeah. But also KelownaNow is a great resource. We have these long interviews, 30-minute interviews. We have the 5-minute interviews as well with Kent. So we have lots of information. We do a ton of stories. We've also interviewed all the party leaders. So if you have young people in your home, especially, have them sit down and watch all the interviews so they can learn about the candidates. Because, I like the 30 minutes because you get to know the candidate, they get to speak, and we're not clipping them, we're not taking a piece of what they have to say. Kevin has a sports background as well, so there's lots of information you can go on his website as well. This is your chance. Every 4 years or less, you get a voice. And right now you see them handing out candy. You see them offering this, that, and another thing, right? Yeah. And then they kind of get deaf after that. Do you know what I mean? But they all want to talk to you. And so this is your chance to say, this is my vote, and it's valuable. And make sure it counts, and then ask for what you need. And then again, accountability, I think, is the biggest thing. So to me, if people won't speak to the media, we've been reaching out time and time again to the health minister with no avail. We would like to speak to the health minister because it's one of the biggest issues in British Columbia. But there is also candidates that won't speak to us as well right now. Yeah. So accountability is a big thing, right? So I'm glad that you're here, and I stress to people that to exercise their vote, and especially if you have young people in your home, to tell them the importance of the vote.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jim. And thank you for the team at Kelowna Now, because you've done phenomenal work, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you for watching Kelowna Now.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.